Disclaimer: the views and opinions expressed in this episode are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of USA Global TV and Radio. The content presented is for informational purposes only and is intended to foster open discussion and debate. Viewer discretion is advised. USA Global TV and Radio does not endorse any particular viewpoint and encourages viewers to seek out additional information and perspectives. Saving America with Dr. David D. Schein.
Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Welcome to Saving America. This is your host, Dr. David D. Schein. I'm pretty sure the whole world knows about the atrocities on October 7, 2023. 1,200 innocent civilians were slaughtered. 250 hostages were taken. A handful were returned under a badly botched USA hostage plan some months back. But the rest have been held under terrible conditions. Many of them are dead. In fact, most recently, 6 hostages, including an American, were executed rather than allowing them to be rescued by the IDF. Gaza stands in ruins, which is sadly appropriate given the cowardly Hamas hide behind their own civilians. I do quickly point out that UN workers and civilians were involved in the attack on the innocent Israelis on October 7th. In other words, I have zero sympathy for the ludicrous and brainless protesters against Israel. With the recent Israeli approach to bombing the terrorists in Lebanon and Yemen, it appears that Israel, pointedly without the support of USA and France, is doing the work for the rest of the world in cleaning up these major terrorist threats. The whole world waits to see what Israel will do with Iran. As America continues cleaning up from the megastorm Helene, it is not a surprise that politics have taken center stage. Over the last week, a controversy has arisen as to whether FEMA has blown much of its money meant to help Americans in emergency situations like Helene on taking care of illegals. DHS, Department of Homeland Security Chief Alejandro Mayorkas, was quoted as saying that FEMA has no money left to help Americans in need. He specifically said that after Hurricane Helene relief, that FEMA will be out of money. It seems odd that DHS had billions to spend to fly illegals in and around the country while feeding, housing, and clothing them. And at the same time, Blinking Fool is proudly announcing that the USA has sent hundreds of millions to Lebanon and Syria to help out in conflicts that are a direct result of failed governments in those countries. How is it the responsibility of the USA? Saudis and the UAE have plenty of their oil money they can spend on this situation, and that is much closer to their countries than it is to the United States. Both sides are making arguments, but it does appear that billions upon billions are being wasted by our federal government, and it is not being spent on citizens trying to recover from Helene. Then to add insult to injury is the Cat 5 Hurricane Milton with a direct hit near Tampa, Florida. The only good news is that Ron DeSantis, the GOP Florida governor, is on top of things, and the state appears to have done all it can to prepare and respond. Just before the storm hit, Harris triggered a firestorm by claiming that DeSantis had refused to call with her. The comedy here is that she is not president. She is not authorized to send help to Florida or any other state. In turn, DeSantis refuted her statement and said if she had called, if he was unavailable, he would have called her back. He apparently considered her claim nothing more than a campaign stunt. And Harris, apparently stung by criticism, even from the slopstream media, suddenly decided to show up at what she saw as friendly media sites, including, of all things, a sex talk podcast. Folks, this is not one of those. And we would certainly be happy to have Miss Harris check in with us. Folks, most Americans with IQs higher than the temperature at the South Pole know that The View is a joke. Of course, that's why appearing there and with one of the late night losers really won't move the needle. Even worse, when she did a long interview with Oprah and then a session on 60 Minutes, she failed. Of course, she declined an interview with Fox. On 60 Minutes, she admitted that she would change nothing about what the Biden-Harris administration has already done. She did not defend the ridiculous and massive failure at the border that she and Biden caused. When confronted, she tried to make it sound like somehow the Republicans were responsible. The situation is 4 times worse than when Trump was in office. How could this be a GOP problem? All told, unless you're a hardcore Dem voter, nothing that Harris has said will be changing your mind. Not a single solution has been articulated by Harris. Blaming Trump, who's been gone nearly 4 years, and the Congress when the Dems hold the presidency and the Senate and are only behind in the House by a few votes is a dead-on arrival strategy, in my humble opinion. Can North Carolina voters in this critical swing state overcome Hurricane Helene challenges? As if the Republicans did not have enough to worry about with all the varying poll results, now the question is whether the hard-hit western and southern areas of North Carolina that took the biggest hit will be able to actually vote despite all the flood damage. It matters since these are the more conservative parts of this swing state. The state took a hit that means housing is in short supply, roads are missing or impassable, and communication systems are down. Elon Musk has been trying to help out with his Starlink system. That is certainly helping, but the need in certain parts of the state is overwhelming. Some information from an article in the Daily Signal had some interesting perspectives on the situation in North Carolina. And quote, the NC Election Board unanimously voted to allow 13 counties most affected by the storm to make changes in the election procedures, so long as there is bipartisan majority to do so. This would include changing or adding voting sites and notifying voters by mail and through local media about such changes as quickly as possible. The resolution adopted by the state board allows the chairman of local election boards to appoint replacement members if someone is unable to carry out his or her duties. Quoting the executive director of the State Board of Elections, these measures were put in place to ensure the victims of Helene can vote in the upcoming election and provide election officials in the hardest hit areas the tools they need to conduct a secure election under extraordinarily difficult circumstances, end quote. Note that North Carolina has a Democrat governor, adding to the concerns of the GOP. Dem majority Federal Communications Commission helping George Soros fast-track takeover of a huge nationwide radio network. All Americans should be concerned about a proposed takeover of about 200 radio stations in the United States. The acquired stations tout 165 million monthly visitors. Many conservative radio shows are presently on these stations, including hosts Sean Hannity, Mark Levin, Glenn Beck, and Eric Erickson. To do so, Soros has asked the FCC to waive a current FCC rule that foreign company ownership of U.S. radio stations is not allowed to exceed 25%. Regardless of your political viewpoint, this many stations under control of one person or entity is bad for America's democracy and for freedom of the press. Hillary Clinton is worried that America has lost total control of the internet and then proposed removal of Section 230. Miss Irrelevancy herself is shooting her mouth off again. The sore loser is obviously worried that the Dems will lose the upcoming election and the internet will not be bowing down to her party. She tried to make it sound like the internet is dangerous for kids and named sites like Instagram, Twitter X, TikTok, and Facebook. The fascinating story is that only Twitter X is really independent. The other sites have been in the back pocket of the Dems for years. So I'm not sure she knows what she's talking about. Section 230 is reference to a statute that says that internet sites are merely carrying information and they are not responsible for the content carried on their site. I endorse the statute with the proviso that they cannot slant the material on their sites. So far, all of the sites she named, and in fact, most of them, are censoring conservative speech. Twitter X is included, but then changed tunes when Elon Musk took it over. Again, my response is they need to be held to being common carriers and stay out of censorship. I, of course, also note that there's a huge amount of really bad stuff out on the internet, and that's called the dark web. The feds have no answer for that. Clinton's silly remarks were under the guise of protecting children. Of course, communists view children as belonging to the state, not their parents. I do urge parental controls. It's called parents watching what their own kids do, monitoring their screen time, giving them a good and moral education. Unfortunately, for those in the current day public schools, it includes saving them from the nonsense being forced on them in many classrooms. She is simply a bitter old biddy. In an important article that was carried via NTD but uses data from Reuters, there are significant changes in the job market that could be a harbinger of tougher times to come. And this is regardless of what happens in the big election nearby. The 53% increase in layoffs is at the highest level since 2020, when America experienced the COVID layoffs. Taking the hit were technology, entertainment and leisure, education, transportation, and manufacturing. In other words, pretty much across the board. In terms of reasons, the outplacement firm Challenger, Gray and Christmas noted cost cutting, business closures, and artificial intelligence as top reasons. Further, projected hiring is down to a very low level, other than hiring for the holidays, which is generally for low-wage jobs in addition to being temporary. In certainly some unwelcome news, the Wall Street Journal reports that Chinese hackers breached the U.S. court wiretap systems. This stunning report claims that the Chinese hackers accessed the networks of the U.S. broadband providers, including Verizon Communications, AT&T, and Lumen Technologies. Garnered from the systems were information that the federal government uses for court-authorized wiretapping. Of course, the Foreign Ministry of Red China, the biggest bunch of liars in the world, other than the U.S. Democrat Party, of course, claimed that this was a false narrative. America must do better to harden its computer infrastructure. It must be the best in the universe. The survival of our country depends on it. A rescue dog leads police to injured 84-year-old owner, thereby saving his life. The story was carried by multiple sources, including NTD. So a couple of weeks ago, Deputy Wright of the Stevens County Sheriff's Office in Washington State was out patrolling a rural wooded area. All of a sudden, he comes across a dog sitting in the middle of the road. It was a black and white border collie. And most people know dogs, know border collies are darn smart. The officer got out of his vehicle but didn't see anyone around. He tried to get the dog into his cruiser, but the dog just wouldn't go. He then did a survey of the nearby homes, but there was nothing visible that he could see. By this time, the dog was laying in the middle of the road. When Deputy Wright approached the dog then got up and trotted up a little used trail. He followed to find an 84-year-old man with a broken leg who could not move. He helped the man who had been there for hours to safety. The 13-year-old dog named Gita was a rescue dog. I believe she has repaid her owner for rescuing her. Our series of interviews for Saving America establishes that the world is full of interesting people. And I think after you hear this interview, you'll agree with me that Claudio Gutierrez is an interesting person. He is an engineer and entrepreneur who helps industry leaders optimize their projects and operations. This makes their organizations more efficient and profitable. Born in Nicaragua, his family was forced to flee the repressive leftist government of the Sandinistas in 1980. He earned his degree in industrial and systems engineering from Florida International University. He is the founder and president of Valens Project Consulting. That was in 2017, and he's still at it today. And he has also taken on a new challenge. And Claudio Gutierrez is running for Texas State Representative in District 147. He's lived in that district since 2007. We welcome Claudio Gutierrez for his first appearance on Saving America.
Thank you very much, Dr. Schein, for having me on your podcast. I'm looking forward to having a good conversation and contributing with my experience to shape Saving America.
Well, it's entirely our pleasure. As you know, we ask our guests 3 questions. And our first one, in your early life, you had the challenges that many others may not have faced. You came to a new country after the situation in Nicaragua. That must have been a very difficult time in your life. Share with our audience how you managed to thrive and earn a degree in engineering.
Well, I don't remember when we fled in Nicaragua, but I know that it happened almost in the middle of the night, like in the movies, because my father had been working for the previous administration. He was a cabinet member for the Somoza administration. And when the Sandinista revolution overthrew Somoza, every cabinet member, everybody that had been involved in the previous administration had a target on their backs. So we fled to Colorado, to Fort Collins, Colorado, where my father was a professor at Colorado State University. Now, that's where I grew up the first few years of my life. I remember not knowing the language for a while. I remember snow. I remember all these. I had very fond memories from those times. But what got me in the path an engineer was, well, it all starts at home. I had very supportive parents. My father himself was a civil engineer. My mother was a biologist that never really practiced her degree because she stayed at home and raised my sister and I. And even any type of extracurricular work that we did, she made fun educational activities out of them. Again, they always emphasized the importance of education, telling us that we had to surpass our expectations for Hispanics that lived in other parts of the country. This was especially true when we moved to Miami, Florida for a few years. She told me, look, we're being categorized as people that are underperforming, so we have to prove that everybody wrong when it comes to education. So we always went above and beyond. And luckily, they always stayed on top of us, my sister and I, when we were in the university, and they helped us to keep our eyes on the prize, so to speak. A good education is the foundation for opportunities. So you know how they say luck is when preparation meets opportunity? I think education is the base of that phrase.
Fantastic. And I can certainly relate to that story. So with your background, many might assume you would be a liberal supporting Democrats. However, that is not the direction you took. Tell our audience how you formed your political viewpoint.
Dr. Schein, it's precisely because I've seen what happens under socialism, what happens under leftism, what happens under communism. That's precisely why I embrace Republican ideals. I love free market competition. I like achievement, and I like navigate life on a merit-based basis, right? I also had a personal kind of skin in the game. My parents were both put in jail under this repressive regime in Nicaragua in the 1980s. My mother for hiding her brothers from forced conscription. She would hide them in the trunk of her car, go into the Costa Rican embassy, and then come out and do that with her other brothers. She was eventually caught and put in jail for a few weeks. My father was randomly at times put in jail whenever possible, just as a form of intimidation. I've seen this repression firsthand. Now, I also believe the Republican views are good. They're supportive of people without being demeaning. They build people up to achieve on their own instead of promising handouts that make people lazy and complacent. So, and also, I remember going to Nicaragua in the 1980s, and I would remember seeing the empty supermarket shelves, the desperation of people wanting to leave Nicaragua. And I knew that was not an environment that I wanted to be in.
That's that's quite a crash course in how things work in the real world, isn't it?
Totally. I mean, communism, leftism sounds excellent on paper. It has never worked anywhere that it's been tried.
Absolutely. So, as you know, I ran for office for state representative as a brand new candidate in 1992. And you are now running for office for the first time for a state representative here in Texas. So, tell our audience something about how you formed your decision and what you hope to accomplish, and maybe a little bit about District 147 here in Texas.
Sure, sure. So I never really wanted to actively be a politician, but I took a look around me a couple of years ago and things were going downhill. Again, I'm from Nicaragua, which is a very poor country, and there are better roads in Nicaragua than many parts of District 147, which Houston, being a very rich city, that's completely unacceptable. I would hear police sirens 2, 3, 4 times a day, and I still do to this day. And it wasn't like that before. So I decided to see where I could help, and I realized that the state representative for the district had not been opposed in the previous election. And I hate walking into the voting booth and seeing Democrat candidates just waltzing into their office because nobody opposes them, nobody challenges them. So that was one of the main reasons. I also decided to run because if we excite the bases, if we get the Republicans and conservatives in the area to come out because there's actually a Republican candidate, it lays down the groundwork for county-wide races. So we can finally turn Houston red. And more importantly, I believe that the residents of District 147 would benefit greatly from conservative ideals such as increased competition, limited government, and keeping things under local control. Now, 147 is a big district. It covers parts of the Heights, most of downtown, parts of Midtown where I live, and then it's a very gerrymandered pizza west. It's, again, very, very gerrymandered. And the composition is mostly Hispanic, about 40% Hispanic, 30% African American, and the rest is a variety of other nationalities. You would think that my Hispanic last name, you would think that my Hispanic in this race, but sadly, most Hispanics do not vote. So my mission right now is to get the word out, to let them know that I exist, because every single time I mention who my candidate is, from talk to him a couple of weeks ago to the man in the streets, every time I tell them who my candidate is, they recoil in frustration, in disgust. So I'm going to capitalize on that feeling to get elected this November.
Well, that sounds like a very worthwhile goal, and I'm sure that if the people in your district get a chance to meet you and understand who you are, hopefully they will turn out in big numbers and support you. And it's just such an important thing. And again, even though I did run for office, I didn't get elected, but I did feel more connected to my community, and or a lot of people who came out and said, we really appreciate what you're doing. And like you said, it's important to have choices in political races. So we certainly support that.
And at this point, having seen firsthand what leftism can do to a nation, I mean, it demoralizes generations of the citizens. I almost feel like it's a moral duty that I have against one of the most woke, one of the most leftist members of the Texas House.
That's so good to know. So how can our audience get more information about you and your campaign?
Well, they can always visit my website, my campaign website. It's my first name, Claudio, then the number 4, and then the entire Texas.com. So Claudio4Texas.com. They can also find me on social media, on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Twitter.
That sounds great. Well, thank you so much, Claudio Gutierrez, candidate for state representative in District 147, for joining us on Saving America.